Nikolay Mikhailovich Karamzin was a Russian writer, poet, historian and critic. He is best remembered for his History of the Russian State, a 12-volume national history. Early life. Karamzin was born in the village of Znamenskoye in Simbirsk Governorate on 1 December 1766. His father was an officer in the Russian army. He was sent to Moscow to study under Swiss-German teacher Johann Matthias Schaden. He later moved to St. Petersburg, where he made the acquaintance of Ivan Dmitriev, a Russian poet of some merit, and occupied himself with translating essays by foreign writers into his native language. After residing for some time in St. Petersburg, he went to Simbirsk, where he lived in retirement until induced to revisit Moscow. There, finding himself in the midst of the society of learned men, he again took to literary work. In 1789, he resolved to travel, visiting Germany, France, Switzerland and England. On his return he published his Letters of a Russian Traveller, which met with great success. These letters, modelled after Irish-born poet Laurence Sterne's A Sentimental Journey Through France and Italy, were first printed in the Moscow Journal, which he edited, but were later collected and issued in 6 volumes. In the same periodical, Karamzin also published translations from French and some original stories, including Poor Liza and Natalia the Boyar's Daughter. These stories introduced Russian readers to sentimentalism, and Karamzin was hailed as a Russian Sterne. Karamzin as a writer. In 1794, Karamzin abandoned his literary journal and published a miscellany in 2 volumes entitled A Glare, in which appeared, among other stories, The Island of Bornholm and Ilya Muromets, the latter a story based on the adventures of the well-known hero of many a Russian legend. From 1797 to 1799, he issued another miscellany, her poetical almanac, The Aeonides, in conjunction with Derzhavin and Dmitriev. In 1798 he compiled the Pantheon, a collection of pieces from the works of the most celebrated authors, ancient and modern, translated into Russian. Many of his lighter productions were subsequently printed by him in a volume entitled My Trifles, admired by Alexander Pushkin and Vladimir Nabokov. The style of his writings is elegant and flowing, modeled on the easy sentences of the French prose writers rather than the long periodical paragraphs of the old Slavonic school. His example proved beneficial for the creation of a Russian literary language, a major contribution for the history of Russian literature. In 1802 and 1803, Karamzin edited the journal The Envoy of Europe. It was not until after the publication of this work that he realized where his strength lay, and commenced his 12-volume History of the Russian State. In order to accomplish the task, he secluded himself for 2 years at Simbirsk. When Emperor Alexander learned the cause of his retirement, Karamzin was invited to TVER, where he read to the emperor the first 8 volumes of his history. He was a strong supporter of the anti-Polish policies of the Russian Empire, and expressed hope that there would be no Poland under any shape and name. In 1816, he removed to St. Petersburg, where he spent the happiest days of his life, enjoying the favor of Alexander I and submitting to him the sheets of his great work, which the emperor read over with him in the gardens of the palace of Tsarskoye Selo. He did not, however, live to carry his work further than the 11th volume, terminating it at the accession of Michael Romanov in 1613. He died on the 22nd of May 1826, in the Tauride Palace. A monument was erected to his memory at Simbirsk in 1845. Karamzin as a linguist and philologist. Karamzin is credited for having introduced the letter E into the Russian alphabet sometime after 1795, replacing the obsolete form that had been patterned after the extant letter. Ironically, the use of that form is generally deprecated, typically appearing merely as E in books other than dictionaries and Russian school children's primers. Karamzin as a historian. Karamzin is well regarded as a historian. Until the appearance of his work, little had been done in this direction in Russia. The preceding attempt of Vasily Tatyshchov was merely a rough sketch, inelegant in style, and without the true spirit of criticism. Karamzin was most industrious in accumulating materials, and the notes to his volumes are mines of interesting information. Perhaps Karamzin may justly be criticized for the false gloss and romantic air thrown over the early Russian annals. In this respect his work is reminiscent of that of Sir Walter Scott, whose writings were at the time creating a great sensation throughout Europe and probably influenced Karamzin. Karamzin wrote openly as the panegyrist of the autocracy. Indeed, his work has been styled the epic of despotism and considered Ivan III as the architect of Russian greatness, a glory that he had earlier assigned to Peter the Great. In the battle pieces, he demonstrates considerable powers of description, and the characters of many of the chief personages in the Russian annals are drawn in firm and bold lines. As a critic, Karamzin was of great service to his country. In fact, he may be regarded as the founder of the review and essay among the Russians. Also, Karamzin is sometimes considered a founding father of Russian conservatism. Upon appointing him a state historian, Alexander I greatly valued Karamzin's advice on political matters. His conservative views were clearly expounded in the memoir on Old and New Russia, written for Alexander I in 1812. This scathing attack on reforms proposed by Mikhail Speransky was to become a cornerstone of official ideology of Imperial Russia for years to come. Selected works. Prose fiction. Evgeny Yulia. English translation. Evgeny and Julia. Bednaya Liza. English translation. Poor Liza. Natalia Boyarskaya Doc. English translation. Natalia the boy's daughter. Prekrasnaya Tsarevna Shastlivikala. English translation. The Beautiful Princess and the Happy Dwarf. Ostrov Bornholm. English translation. Island of Bornholm. Afinskaya Zhizn. English translation. Athenian Life. Melodor K. Philaltu. English translation. Melodor to Philale. Julia. English translation. Julia. Marfa Posadnitsa. English translation. Martha the Mayoress. Moya Ispoved. English translation. My Confession. Chavs Vitalny I Kolodny. English translation. The Sensitive and the Cold. Riza Nashe Govremany. English translation. A Night of Our Times. Non-fiction. Pismo Ruskogopuchestvenika. English translation. Letters of a Russian Traveler. Zapiska Odrevny I Novoy Rossi. English translation. Memoir on Ancient and Modern Russia. Historia Gosudarstva Rossiyskogad. English translation. History of the Russian State. Poetry 1787. Darovanya. English translation. Gifts. Solovi. English translation. Nightingale. Proti ili Nesiglasi Ustikart Vortsa. English translation. Proteus, or Inconsistencies of a Poet. Ego Imperatos Komu Velichestvu Alexandru I Samodajsu v Serisiuskomu na Voshestvi Ego na Prestel. Gimn Glubsum. English translation. Hymn to the Fools. K. Emily I. English translation. To Emily. K. Dobrodatelli. English translation. To Virtue. Osvobojdany Evropy I Slava Alexandra I. English translation. The Freeing of Europe and the Glory of Alexander I.